Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I am here with a wrap up of all the reading that I did in March. There's a chance I'll finish a book today, but probably not until after midnight. So let's just get started because in March I read 15 books, which is a bit high for me, at least lately. My anxiety's been high in the last couple of months. But reading is my relaxation and my escape, so that probably explains why this month was a little high and why actually last month was a little low for my usual. But let's get started. The first book that I finished in March was Circe by Madeline Miller. She wrote the Song of Achilles, which I really liked, and I really enjoyed Circe. So if you don't know the Greek myth of Circe, she's a character we see in the Odyssey, and I've never actually read the Odyssey. Don't come for me, but you kind of don't need to because you get a nice summary of that here, because at one point in his journey Odysseus spends some time with Circe in an island, and she's a kind of immortal. She is the daughter of a god and a nymph, and she is also a witch. And so you get to see her from her early childhood all the way up until she meets Odysseus, and then past Odysseus as well. And the myth is just fantastically told. You get to see a lot of other mythological figures and stories in here as they intersect with Circe. And just the writing was really fantastic, really immersive. I was reading this with my friend Alyssa, and we were chatting every week about it, and we actually had to slow down a little bit and be like, okay, no, I want to enjoy it. I don't want to just binge read it. And so it was a fantastic experience reading it, and it was fantastic to read it with one of my best friends. The next book that I finished in March was Breathless by Beverly Jenkins. I really love Beverly Jenkins, everything I've read from her so far. So this is book number 2 in her Old West series, I believe it is. And in this one you follow Portia, who we met in the first book actually, and then Kent. And Kent we actually met in the previous book as well, but now they're in Arizona. And one of the things I really love about Beverly Jenkins's writing is that she weaves history into her books so beautifully. You still get the romance story, but she lets you see a lot of what Arizona was like at this time, especially through the eyes of her Black characters. And it's just freaking fantastic. I really recommend, if you like historical romances and you haven't read Beverly Jenkins, I really suggest you give her a try. Look around, see what tropes you might like or might not like in her writing. I've noticed so far, at least in the things I've read from hers, that virginity tends to be emphasized quite prominently. Her main heroines, I think so far in every single book of hers that I've read, has been a virgin, and that virginity is a significant part of the story. And yeah, I don't mind it. It's actually a trope I kind of like in my historical romances. Not in my contemporaries, but in my historical romances I like them. And this one worked really well for me, so I can't wait to keep reading more Beverly Jenkins and eventually kind of do a video on her oeuvre. The next book I finished in March was Duke I'd Like to F. This is a series of novellas, short stories. It's an anthology with several writers. I picked up this book because of Adriana Herrera. I wanted a taste of how she would write a historical, because she is currently writing a historical romance, a series of historical romances set in Paris during the World's Fair in Paris. And so I picked up the anthology as soon as it came out. It was also a nice taste of some of the other authors in here, and I found that I liked some of them and not others. Fortunately for me, in this anthology, I had heard Castaneda over at Always Doing talk about this, and she kind of warned me that there is quite a few of the stories focus on an age discrepancy. Some of them are just May, December romances, and I was perfectly fine with that. I was not fine necessarily with all of them. Some of them are in tricky, are a little bit tricky. So I did not love every single short story here. I really, really enjoyed Adriana Herrera's story here because she actually takes her characters from England to France and back, and I like. she writes for me, or a lot of her writing is for me. Like, yeah, like the large chunk of her writing is for me. This was right up my alley because her main character in the short story was black. The hero is a duke. Well, all the heroes are dukes. This duke I like to have anthology. But the main character who owns her own kind of like herbalist, witchy shop, and is also just very confident in her own skin and her position in society. Like, I just love the confidence of this female character so much. Like I said, I like some of the other stories, so I'm going to check out some of the things by those authors, but some of them were kind of uncomfortable for me. I couldn't do it. So I'll just leave it at that for now, but if you are interested in this anthology and you have questions about that, I'm happy to talk about it down in the comment section. Alright, the next book that I finished in March was Ring Shout by P. DjèlÍ Clark. Okay, this is a pen name, and the author is actually a historian, and it's no wonder now that I love all of their novellas that I've read, and they integrate history so beautifully. In fact, one of the first novellas by him that I read was set in New Orleans. I'm looking up the name right now. I loved the way the history was integrated into that, and I felt like I was really reading a very accurate portrayal of New Orleans in the Black God's Drum. Yeah, the New Orleans that you see in there is just so historically accurate, even though this is a kind of fantasy sci-fi story. So that was really fantastic, even though my problem with that book was that it was too short. Ring Shout, though, was just the right length. I mean, I could have read more of this book, but it's set in the American South, post-Civil War, post-Reconstruction, as the KKK is forming. Birth of a Nation has come out, and it really makes the KKK and white supremacy real evil. Like, the monsters are real here. They're not just human. There's a fantastical element, so there's a real monster to fight, and our main character is a monster fighter. She's one of the people that can see monsters for who they are rather than the physical form that most humans see them as, and is a kind of chosen one to fight this evil. The whole story was just so well told. It's high tension, high action, but with character development. I just cannot say enough things about this. And Shannon over at That's So Poe recommended a couple of other things from the author, and I think I'm just going to try to read everything they've put out, because just, if I ever wrote books, I would want them to be as good as Clark writes them, and I just have fallen in love with their writing. Alright, the next book that I finished in March was The 13 Problems by Agatha Christie. So this is a series of short stories in which Miss Marple takes place, but most of them are basically like Miss Marple and people she's around sitting down and talking about, oh, these creepier murders that happen, or creepy things. Can you figure out the solution? Some of them really worked for me. Some of them were really interesting. It was really fun to see Miss Marple really shine, because they don't think there's much in this older lady except she can figure out who done it. The short story format is a hit and miss one for me, but overall I enjoyed these Miss Marple stories. The next book I finished was a reread, and this is quite noteworthy because I very rarely reread books, but I reread Martha Wells's all systems red. This is the first in the Murderbot series. I'm gonna continue reading Murderbot, and so that's why I picked up this first one. I have to say, I love the character of Murderbot. I find it, the character just so fantastic. On a reread though, I think this book is a little overhyped. I think in terms of the story and the writing, it's a little bit wanting. But the character of Murderbot is fantastic. So, and these are short enough that I'm like, if you're interested, pick them up. The next book that I finished in March was Reimagining Liberation, How Black Women Transformed Citizenship in the French Empire by Annette Joseph-Gabriel. This is a fantastic history book. I don't know that I would really recommend it for people who don't typically read nonfiction, but if you read nonfiction and can read very heavy academic works of history, then I think you can handle this one. And in fact, while a lot of it is history, there's also a lot of literary analysis, because what Joseph-Gabriel does here is use the writings of some really, what should be really prominent Black women, like for example Suzanne Césaire, whose husband is really well known, but a lot of her own writing was just not properly preserved in the archives. And so one of the key themes in the story is the way in which Black women have been erased from the archives, and that has a real significant impact on, you know, how we tell the history, what we say about them. But by looking at their writing and their letters, she's able to piece together large parts of the way in which these women really shaped a new understanding of French citizenship, both within the French political system and also outside of it. So she has women in here like Paulette Nardal and Eugénie Ebouetel and Jane Vial, who primarily worked within the French system. Also Suzanne Césaire, I think. Some of these women were actually elected to the Constitutional Convention after World War II, so they actually had an impact in including the colonies in France's first constitution after World War II, and then were elected as delegates from the Tom Domes in the First National Assembly after the Second World War. So this is one I would recommend for people who want to read heavy academic history, but if not, then I will have another video. I've decided to do a dedicated video to this book and really delve a little bit more into the history for some of these women, because I think it is very important. The next book that I finished in March was The Killing Dance. This is book number 6 in the Anita Blake series. And okay, this is another series that I started because of Cousin at Always Doing, and this is her favorite book in the series, and like, yeah. Yes, because the whole series, there's a lot of romantic tension built up between Anita Blake and a vampire and a werewolf? Yeah, werewolf. Shapeshifter? It's a bit ambiguity there. But either way, there's this intense love triangle happening, and we finally have the consummation of that. That's all I can say. Oh my god, it's just, I really liked this book. So much consent, so much tension, so much plot. If you really like plot, the Anita Blake series gives you plenty of plot. The next book that I finished is a book that I will have a dedicated video for coming up next week. It is The Monsters of Chavez Ravine by Debra Castaneda. This is a book that I found via NetGalley. I was just searching on NetGalley because I was like in between books, and I saw that they had this one that it was just available. I didn't have to request it, but I did read an advanced reader's copy via NetGalley. It's a novella, and it is set in Chavez Ravine. If you don't know, if you're not from LA, you might not know, and even if you are from Los Angeles, you still might not know. Dodger Stadium is built on what used to be Chavez Ravine. This was a neighborhood of low income that was forced out of there, and then afterwards the stadium was built and all of that. So it's a story very much about racism, about the inequity of the political system, and it also makes the monsters real. It makes the monsters very real. There are like real fantastical monsters in this story. The main character I really connected with, she's really struggling between her familial responsibilities, the responsibilities towards her family, and what, her path, what she views as her path in life, and wanting to forge her own path. So I really liked it. Like I said, I normally like these short novella stories are hit and miss for me, and this one was a hit. It's not a perfect story, but I really enjoyed it, so I'll be back to talk more about that one. One that you've already heard me talk about if you watched my last video is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. So this is a thriller that is about gentrification in Brooklyn. I will link the video that I just did on this if you missed it and want to see me talk more about it. But again, it's another one of these books that makes the monsters real. And I really like this strategy that I'm seeing in these books of making the monsters real, because it gives our protagonist something to fight, and it makes you feel much more in control of a political system that often feels really hard to move and really hard to shape as an individual. And so I've just really been enjoying this theme in the books that I've been reading. In fact, I should probably do a video on this theme and some recommendations of books that really use that theme really well. Let me know if you'd be interested in that, because that just popped in my head as I was talking about this right now. The next book I finished in March is A Deadly Inside Scoop. This is book number 1 in the An Ice Cream Parlor Mysteries by Abby Collette. So this is a cozy romance featuring Black characters. Like the main family in the story is Black, but it's a small town mystery ice cream shop. That sucked me right in. I also love the play on words that cozy mysteries use a lot in their titles. The mystery in this one was okay. What interests me the most in this one was the main character, Bronwyn. She is just really fantastic. I really liked her. I liked that she is she's reopening the ice cream shop and really wanting to go back to the roots of the ice cream shop, back to what her grandmother envisioned for the ice cream shop. So I loved those family elements. What I'm finding with a lot of cozy mysteries is that the mysteries are sometimes not super interesting, and so it's got to be the world and the characters that really have to hold my attention. And this one did it. So if you're into cozy mysteries, I would recommend this one. I'm not sure if I would recommend it necessarily as an entryway into cozy mysteries, but if you're into cozy mysteries and have that one available, I would recommend it. The next book that I finished was also a very short, tiny novella, The Eternal Atom by Jules Verne. And my friend made me read this because this is her favorite Jules Verne book, and I really enjoyed it. It's a little bit hard to get into at first, but once you get into it, especially once you get to the meat of what the story is about, it's fantastic. It's got themes of history and the future and how we can shape the future, the limits of that, and just it imagines a future for humanity that is very cyclical and interesting. And it's also a future in which the people in the future that Jules Verne imagines are looking back and trying to trace back the origins of humanity, and the discovery that they make is just perfect. Oh my god, my little historian heart was just this is fantastic. So I really enjoyed it, and I think if you're into history, you would enjoy it as well. If you're not into history, probably stay away. The next book I finished in March was Gone Missing by Linda Castillo, and this is book number 4 in the Kate Burkholder series. So this is a kind of mystery thriller series set in Amish country. I believe it's in Ohio. I always want to put it in Ohio, but I don't know exactly It's rural, Midwest, and Kate Burkholder is the police chief in this community, where there's an Amish community, and there's a lot of distrust between the Amish community and the non-Amish community. And because Kate is formerly Amish, she tries to bridge that gap, and with various degrees of success. And the mystery in here was interesting enough. I am still enjoying Kate in the story and her relationship with the main male character. So this did what it had to do for me. The next book that I finished in March was Going Green by Nick Spalding. This was my book club's pick for March. You can hear my dog. Link, be a good boy. This was such a hilarious book. I started reading it in bed because I have to read in bed before I fall asleep. And I woke up my significant other and the dogs. I woke you up, Lincoln. Come up. Because I laughed out loud. The premise is that there's this marketing company, this PR company that is getting bought out. And the new owner wants to have an environmental focus, like they want to target companies that are doing good for the environment. Our main character is not an environmentalist. She doesn't even recycle. She does all kinds of bad things, but she's afraid of losing her job, and she's trying to impress the boss. Basically, she's a kind of Bridget Jones character that just gets into the most awkward, embarrassing, hilarious situations. It's rare. Okay, a couple of things with me. I'm a very emotionally driven reader. So I cry so quickly when reading books. But I don't laugh very easily. Like, I can find something funny, but I don't laugh out loud very often. And I just kept laughing throughout this story. And it was perfect. It was just what I needed while I was reading a bunch of other heavier things. So it really hit the spot. And then the last book that I finished in March was Here to Stay by Adriana Herrera. I've been promising a video just focused on Adriana Herrera. I just really love her writing. She writes contemporary romances, often with queer characters. This one in particular is not. The main characters are, I believe they're straight. Are they straight? Maybe they're not completely straight, but this is a male-female relationship. And I just really, really enjoyed it. The conflict for the main couple was the only thing that kept me from like loving, like giving it, those 5 stars. This is one of my favorite books ever. That was the only thing that kept me. But the main character is Julia, and she is a transplant from New York. She just moved to Texas. She went to Texas following a man who, a couple of weeks into being in Texas, cheats on her, and the relationship disappears. But she is enjoying Texas. This is the place where she's meant to be. She's running this nonprofit that is doing a lot of really good work. Enter Rocco, who is coming in because the company that funds the nonprofit Julia works for is trying to become an IPO. And he is there to help in that transition and to make recommendations about what to cut and what not to cut. And so Julia's job is kind of dependent on what the assessment Rocco gives. And the attraction is palpable from the very beginning. And I love that kind of writing. The complications of, their jobs and their personal relationship is a part of the story. It's not ignored. It is dealt with directly by the characters. And I think that conflict just went on a little bit too long for me. But otherwise, this is just an amazing story. We have a Afro-Latina main character who is confident, sure of herself. We have a main male character who is cinnamon bun like, but also very, a little bit alpha. Like, he's alpha when it comes to like physical stuff, but very cinnamon roll in other ways. I really enjoyed both characters' backstories, and it was just, it's a good romance. I really enjoyed it. So I have to do, I just have one more book by Adriana Herrera that I need to read. It's the 4th book in the Dreamer series, and then I can talk fully about, my complete thoughts on everything I've read from her. Clearly, I really enjoy it, though. A lot of good social justice themes are present in Here to Stay, and that is it. Whew. Those are all the books that I read in March. Hopefully this video is not obnoxiously long. If you have read any of the books that I talked about here, let me know down below. If you're interested in more full dedicated reviews on any of these books, also let me know down below. I will for sure be doing some of them, but I always appreciate getting some feedback on that as well. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.